think one of probably the biggest myths I get from people is, Amira, I'm a bad communicator. Oh no, I'm just not good at it. I can't speak in public. I can never speak up and express myself. I can't tell my partner how I feel. And that's it. It's like a full stop. And people think that's just who I am. And I always, that's just me, Amira, part of my personality. And I'm like, that's your first myth. Okay. Not part of your personality. It's a skill. And every single one of us can learn it. It took me best part of 10 years. And so I've put together frameworks and like methodologies so it doesn't take everyone else the same amount of time.
Hello, Amira. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your patience because I know this has been booked in a while. We've had a couple of conversations, and when you already vibe with somebody, you just know that it's gonna be a good conversation. So I've got a good feeling.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And with that, let's dive into the first question, which I'm always super curious to hear the answers to. What is something that at some point felt impossible for you and now is your new normal?
Hands down, I don't even have to think about this one, running a business. And I think
Oh,
it's probably taken me up until this point to say, I have a business, I run a business, and it works.
what took you like? Why now? What has changed?
Yeah, such a good question. I remember when I launched the business, so many of my friends said, about time. It took you long enough. And I am the biggest believer of trust the timing of your life. And I really believe that we all have a certain path. Doesn't mean you don't have control, doesn't mean you don't have choice, but things will happen exactly when they're supposed to. And for me, I had a narrative for most of my life that I wasn't entrepreneurial enough. I was like, I'm not creative enough. I can't be an entrepreneur. And I also think like what you see and what you see role model, it's so important to you. And it's so interesting because my brother's always worked for himself and we grew up in the same household, we grew up in the same family. But that's where I really think me being the eldest out of both of us had like a different impact on me versus my brother. And so he's always been really entrepreneurial from the beginning. And at school, he'd be that kid that would sneak in all the snacks and go and sell them for double the price and or undercut the sweet shop at school. And he was like known for that. And he was always like being creative and using his initiative. And as the eldest, I was like the good girl, did what I was supposed to do, studied hard, worked hard. And so it really created that narrative in me that I can't be entrepreneurial. And it was my own narrative that I gave myself. Nobody ever said it to me. Um, and so I didn't think I could do it. I never thought I'd know what to do or how to do it. And obviously now we are in a complete different space, but that is definitely like a huge hurdle that I had to overcome.
I'm curious because I can relate actually to a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Where I don't even can it's weird where I don't feel comfortable being like, "Oh, I'm a business owner." It's still like something still hasn't clicked. And even like what you said about the being the good girl, doing the right thing, I can so relate because when I was growing up, I was like, I have to have the best marks. I have to do everything right, cause no trouble. And I think, and I'm curious to hear your perspective from your experience. As you were speaking, I was thinking maybe what could cause that friction towards starting the business is that assumption that you have to be perfect. You have to have all the answers. You have to know everything A to Z, which, as you know from your experience, it's not the case with the business because a lot of it is you figured it out along the way. And I think that uncertainty or that because I think for me, one thing that I have identified is that I would initially kind of add my self-worth, self-value to the way I was performing. So now add to that business where there's like everything, and the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. and, and like going through that was such a interesting experience to navigate because it is like you have to go through in some ways complete shift in the way you perceive things and yourself. Is that something that you have seen in your experience as well?
I honestly, I'm smiling so hard because you hit the nail on the head. I like to think of it as this is our typical trait as high achievers and female or not. I always say like actually gender is irrelevant and probably because I work with such a mix of clients, but so many of us as our type A high achiever, and then add as well pressure of culture or religion on top of that, that there is only one way to succeed or to do well or to be held in a high regard. And exactly as you said, it feeds the belief that you have to be perfect. And I've told this story before, but probably not for a long time. And I remember when I really kind of started getting into my mindset work, and me and my brother actually used to do it together. And one of my mantras was, I am perfect. And I always feel like I have to explain it, because it wasn't that I truly believed I was perfect, but I really did believe that I could seek perfection in every aspect of my life. And that's what I was seeking. So it wasn't, I believe I'm the bee's knees. Believe I'm the best thing ever. It was from a space of, that's what I'm chasing. And you're so right. Having a business, running a business completely knocks that on its head. But before I actually talk about how I broke it, I think you're so right in terms of your productivity, your identity, and your worth becomes so intrinsically linked between your output, your outcome, what you become known for. And so you become known for being the high achiever, for always getting great results. And what it teaches you not to do is, you don't know how to get it wrong. You don't know how to fail. You don't know how to be anything less than great or perfect. And it's such a detrimental space to be. Like, it took me so long to be able to piece it together. But I kind of giggle now when somebody, because I still do get it. And sometimes people will play back to me and be like, oh, you're such a perfectionist. And it's interesting because I have an Achilles heel, and that's not my Achilles heel. And since having a business, one of the things I was able to flip more or less immediately was my perfectionist trait, because you know that when you're running a business, you also need to earn money. And I wasn't in a position at the time when I launched to not. And so I learned very quickly that we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do this messy. We're going to have to do this with really rubbish branding and DIY. And you're going to have to be okay with it looking ugly as hell. And so that's actually one of the things that I learned quickly from the early days of running the business, that you better fail, and you better fail fast, because the sooner you do, the more you learn. And if you're not learning every day, forget it. I don't know why you're a business owner. So it's so interesting, because I really feel like I have the pre business Amira and the version as a business owner. And it's one of the things that I managed to do myself. And I'm really proud of it, because it was so ingrained. It was so part of me. And someone recently, I was just having a general conversation. I'd been to a running club, met somebody new, and they were asking about the business. And they said, so you're 4 years in, and they were looking to like get started. And they said, so like, do you make mistakes? And I looked at them and I said, are you joking me? Every single day I go to bed and think, God, okay, could you have done this differently? All right, cool. You haven't done this enough. All right, look where this is tracking. Okay, well, how can we do this? And they said, what? And I said, yeah. And I said, same goes for my team. So long answer there, but it was so layered, and it was just so beautiful. You set me up for that so so wonderfully. But yeah, if you're not learning, if you're not making a mistake, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're not growing, and you're not moving forward. And that's really sad. So actually, when I changed my perspective, it changed how I felt about it.
Last question I have before we go into the communication piece. You mentioned failing fast, and that's something that I see, and I have experienced, and to some extent, probably still experience that fear of failure, fear of maybe even like I don't even think uncertainty that comes with the failure, because through building my stuff, I have come quite comfortable with uncertainty, where it's kind of like you now expect it in some ways.
Mm,
But I have seen a lot of that fear of making decision because of that potential failure, where it's ironic, but a lot of times we have regrets before we have even made that decision. We
mm.
already think of like, oh, if I make this decision, I will regret this, before we have even taken the first step in taking that decision. Question there would be, how has your relationship to failure or taking risks or going into the uncertain changed before you had a business and now that you're like 4 years in?
Yeah, gorgeous question. Couple of things there for me, because I think my I don't want to say issue problem, because it makes it sound so bad, but my, I guess, blind spot, and the thing I always have to work on, rather than it being your fear of failure, is your fear of success. And
Oh.
because yeah, and the 2 as well can also be so intrinsically linked. So anyone listening, I do wanna, like, flag that, and I'm not saying that the fear of getting it wrong was never there. For sure, it was. But underneath that, what was really driving it is I was so used to being the underdog, and that was, like, my label, and that was my identity, and so I knew how to fight. If you put me, like, bottom of the pile, I'm good. I will fight, and I'll show, and I'll prove. But what it also meant is that when things were going well, I didn't know how to hold space for that. So coming back to your question, when you talk about like the risk and how do you get okay with that, and you're so right, like that uncertainty, I think as well, it's letting go of there's no right decision. And if you think about how many people are telling you, how many people are out there telling you how to run a business, there's not one way of doing it. There are multiple ways. And so part of it is I'm really against being spoon fed information. And I mean, I coach for a living. So if you're a type of client that wants me to tell you how to do it, I'm not the coach for you. And I apologize already, but we won't work together. And it's because my goal for you is for you to live your life from a really authentic heart space. And so you can't do what I've done because it may not work for you, but I can coach you for you to understand how you're going to get there. So I think with the risk taking to really answer your question is there feels like more to lose now, and I think I was actually better at just experimenting in the early days, and your business grows and the pressure grows. And it's interesting because I remember how scared I really felt in that first year. But yeah, I look back now and I look at like how much free time I had and I look at how many people weren't relying on me. So the pressure changes and the fear and the risk changes. But it's a reminder to myself that if I'm not taking a risk, I'm not trying something. And do I ever want to drop the ball? I don't, because that still runs really deeply in me. And there's like some spaces that are like my non-negotiables. So like my one-to-one clients, don't want to drop the ball with them. Everything else I'm pretty okay with. And so if we don't experiment, and you can take content, for example, the way I create content now has had to evolve, had to shift, I have to pivot. And is it where I want it to be right now? Not really. Is it something that I play over and over again? I think, "Oh, what can we do differently? Okay, we're not taking enough risk." For sure. So there's a really long-winded way of answering your question, but the pressure changes as you evolve. And if you're not taking a risk, then I think one of the key things as a business owner is you need to change and pivot, and you need to be able to do that really flexibly, adaptably, and like be able to think on your feet and react. And if you don't change with the world, the circumstances, the way we feel as humans and people, then I'm not sure you're going to survive. So I think it's been training my brain to learn how to like lean into the excitement of it. And yeah, sometimes it's going to go wrong and it's going to fall flat on its head, but you're gonna pick yourself up and you're gonna find a different solution.
Yeah, it's actually what you said about that pressure. There's like two things I want to share. Like with that pressure, I heard Alex Hormozy talk about how he's doing the meditations where he's talking to his 85-year-old self.
Whoa.
And I did that one day when I was on a walk. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can just walk around, nobody recognizes me, and I have all this freedom to do whatever I want in this time. I don't have people rushing and asking me stuff from my team and things like that, where like my team is not big enough or our like operations are not that big where I'm that needed and I can just go on a walk whenever I decide to go on a walk, where I have this like free time in the day." And and I remember how it was such a big shift in perspective where initially it would be like you go on a walk and you focus on the negatives or even like where you're not instead of I'm so blessed. Even with like last year I had my word of the year was freedom. And I remember I was back home, which also I just decided to go home like the day before and I just went home and I was in a car with my brother and I remember thinking, "Oh, this is it. Like, I'm already there. Maybe it's smaller scale than I'm thinking or like focusing on, but I'm actually already there because I had the freedom to just go spend time with family and on like a random Wednesday." And there was something about it that it's a complete shift in perspective. But also I like what you shared about the way you approach coaching because I do believe in your philosophy around it because it's not about teaching somebody how to live the way you live. It's
Mm,
about guiding them to find their answers, which they already have inside of them. It's just that they need the right questions. Sometimes they need a bit of encouragement. They might need to borrow some of your belief in themselves until they believe in themselves enough. And that's where I think it's such a powerful way to approach it, because I think it also shows how well you are in serving them. Because a lot of times I think what can happen with like a lot of people that are like in coaching space, it's they kind of take some pride in making people live the way they live, as if that's like the best way or the only way or this is the only approach. Like I remember with my friend, we had a conversation and she said that I went through like with our friendship, we went through this annoying phase with me where I was in my coaching mode. And I remember, like, she said that she was so annoyed that I kept talking about 5 a.m. club or 5 a.m. mornings, and she couldn't care less about them. But
Yeah.
I was like, 5 a.m., 5 a.m. And then I experienced something similar with another friend of mine who went into coaching mode. And I remember I messaged her. I was like, oh, I get what, why you were like a bit of like taking some space from me at that period of time. But because now, like, it's the where our friendship is now, it's like you have your way, I have my way. How can I support you? How can you support me? And full acceptance and support in whatever it is that is the pursuit. And I think that's really beautiful the way you explained it. That it's about helping them to find their authentic and not kind of force on. I think that the best thing for you, based on my perception, is this.
You're so right, and I always talk about, like, our perception and our lens that we see the world through. Every single one of us has our own blueprint, and it's funny, I was doing my client check-ins before this, and, one of my clients was playing back, but my language, and I said, "It's so strange hearing you play it back to me," but I talk a lot about your communication blueprint and actually understanding what drives the way that you behave, you communicate, the way you interact, because that's come from a space, and there's gonna be things that are helpful for you, and there's going to be things that don't serve you. And so our goal is, how are we going to reshift some of those habits and behaviors so you feel good within yourself? And you touch on so many beautiful points, from like mindset and abundance, and like really channeling and having the thankfulness for where you're at already, and realizing I'm already there. And I think our human brain, especially as achievers, I always say it's like the double-edged sword. Is the thing that keeps us going, keeps us striving, keeps us growing. We also need to look at when it does us such a disservice. And I recently, like, ran a race on Sunday, and I feel like my whole socials know this story because I took them on the journey with me, and I got, like, my best time I'd got. I haven't raced for, like, quite a few years, but I was racing against my husband, and it was more or less like I really thought it was in the bag, and I thought I was gonna win, and I didn't, and it was such a tough loss for me because we bet on something, so there was, like, stakes at play, and even though I came the first female home, I got personal best, I didn't beat him. And all my brain could fixate on was that. So I think when you talk as well about going home and realizing, wait, I get to do this. Like, freedom is my word. I get to, on a random Wednesday, go home and spend time with people that I love. And I think that gratitude piece and looking for the good is so important. And then even when you said, like, getting out of coach mode, and I feel like every coach has been there. And I always say golden rule, switch it off when you're with your friends and families because they hate you for it. And understanding, and it is as well, like, such a privileged space. So I always say, like, someone has to want to go through the process. So it really made me giggle because I can relate on that.
Yeah, it's something that initially you don't know how to do it.
Mm,
It's especially like for me, I feel like I was already into coaching before I knew what it was. It
yeah.
was like a natural thing that I have always been doing, whether
Mhm.
it was like on me or people in my life. I
Yeah.
have always been that person. But I think I just have learned to adjust in a sense that, one, not everybody needs coaching. Not everybody wants coaching.
Mm,
Sometimes they just want to have a conversation with you. Sometimes they just want to go on a walk. And
yeah.
that's it. That's all they want.
I don't wanna know, like, I can do better. Don't give me your opinion on the observations. I just wanna be present. And it's so, and it's funny, as much as, like, we're laughing about it, because I also say it to my clients as well, and I was like, "You're in this coaching container with me, but at some point one, I want you to at least have a pause from it and break from it. But also, as we go through that journey, where are the fun pieces? Where are you still being human? Because I know as well, sometimes it can feel, depending on what world you're in, but sometimes it can feel like we're swamped in self development. And I'm the biggest fan of it. But actually, I always think, how do you embed it into your life and make it a way of living rather than fixate on it? But you're so right. Like in the early days when you're first doing something, it's really difficult to do that, and it evolves. And then you kind of find your sweet spot with it.
Yeah. All right. So communication. You mentioned communication blueprint.
Hmm.
What is it? And yeah, maybe let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. So I always say every single one of us has our own unique communication blueprint, and it's the space that I really coach every single one of my clients from. So it's understanding, how do you currently communicate? And I'll break it down into a few subsections, but understanding really, what do you do well and what do you not do well? And a lot of it, not everything, but a lot of how you communicate will come from experiences, from your role models, from your caregivers, the people that have had impact on you. And don't forget as well, I always think about like your teachers. Teachers have huge impact. I always feel like they need to be held to such a high regard. And sometimes when you get a bad teacher, you don't realize how much they like really stay with you, or their comments, or they can be mean and underhand. So your communication blueprint is really understanding, how do you communicate? What parts of your blueprint work for you and we want to keep, and what parts don't work for you? So I know that like you've recently done this as well, but I always start from the space of, let's understand your communication style, because I think one of probably the biggest myths I get from people is, Amira, I'm a bad communicator. Oh no, I'm just not good at it. I can't speak in public. I can never speak up and express myself. I can't tell my partner how I feel. And that's it. It's like a full stop. And people think that's just who I am. And I always, that's just me, Amira, part of my personality. And I'm like, that's your first myth. Okay. Not part of your personality. It's a skill. And every single one of us can learn it. And I think I had to figure so much of it out by accident. And I read somebody else's email actually from one of my mentors today. And he literally wrote it as though like, I could imagine myself writing it. And he said it took him 10 years to like learn all of these skills. And I say the same thing. It took me best part of 10 years. And so I've put together frameworks and like methodologies. So it doesn't take everyone else the same amount of time. But my first thing is understand your blueprint. So understand, what's your communication style? How do you like to communicate? And there's two kind of sides of it. One side is like the quiz that I've put together, and people can
Where
take.
can they find it?
I'm literally going to send you the link, so you've got it
Okay.
in show notes. But it's on the website, and it's literally a 5 to 10 minute quiz maximum. And what you're going to understand is actually more of your style. So, do you like lots of information when you communicate? Is that how you like to give information? Do you actually communicate in a really expressive way? Like you come in with your ideas, your vision, and you get people excited. Like you can take people on the journey. Do you like to actually get straight to the point? Are you quite direct? Are you solutions focused? Or are you more of like a people communicator? So you think about how people feel. So first of all is understanding like that style. You might as well relate to more than one, which definitely people can
I
be
was
a
about to ask about that.
bit. Yeah, and I was gonna say, feel free.
Some answers were hard to choose. I'm like, which one it is?
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's so important because I want to always flag the nuance around it. That when you take the quiz, it's going to come out with one result. But when you read through the results, I'm not surprised if you find yourself at least a blend of two. Some people relate to more. And also, the thing with it as well that I really want you to kind of like look at your results and read and ask yourself is, how much have you adapted over time, over your work situations, over the relationships that you've been in? Because all of us would have adapted at some point, but just think about what you do innately. What's like your go to? So that's one part of it. And then the other side I say is, we've got a spectrum of what healthy communication looks like, which is assertiveness. Is the only way to communicate. And people love to challenge me on this, but we've got all of the other unhealthy styles around that, which is your passive communication, your passive aggressiveness, your aggressiveness, or your manipulative. And so when I talk about your communication styles, I like to talk about both. One is around your quiz and your style. And I don't want to say personality, but like, how do you like to give information? How do you like to receive it? And then the goal is really understanding, okay, where are you already assertive? Because usually there's elements of it. Nobody's really just 100% passive. There's going to be areas in relationships you do it well, And then let's look at where does maybe the passive or passive aggressiveness or one of the other styles show up, and where is it unhealthy and unhelpful? And then from there, we'll build out your blueprint and we'll affect your habits, your behaviors. Is it you don't speak up? Is it you get defensive? And then we'll start to build it from there before we look at how we want to change it.
It's it's really interesting pr- how important communication is and
Mm,
how little we actually intentionally work on it.
yeah.
It's kind of become that it's I know that for me I had that one networking conversation with one person who is I think he's been an NLP practitioner before it even was an NLP thing. And we were talking a lot about communication. I was explaining things that I do or that I focus on or I'm like really curious about. And he was like, "You're literally just describing me the whole thing that I'm doing." I'm like, "Huh? Really?" Because I think a lot of it, and I because I have worked so much on myself, which initially started with how do I fix myself? I think that's how everybody who gets into psychology starts. What is wrong with me? How do I fix it? And like through that, I would study so much, even when it comes to communication. There was interesting thing that I learned, which makes so much sense. There's four layers that you have to go through. What I think, how I communicate it, how you hear it, and how you interpret it. That's
Oh,
what I have to go through
mm,
just to deliver my message. And now imagine if it's me talking to you that I know versus somebody that even not know. It's like one on one. I can actually you can respond back to me. I can correct it and then try again.
yeah,
Versus if you talk to on like share something on social media, there's no like in interaction where you can quickly kind of adjust that. And it's so easy to be misinterpreted, especially with the messaging,
yeah.
which I recently posted video how I don't remember who I was talking to, but I remember they responded back with emoji that was with teeth, smiling emoji. And I felt like they're making fun of me because I thought it's a laughing emoji. And I'm
Mm,
like, hey, um, I want to be like weird or anything, but I just wanted to check.
yeah,
Wait, this emoji that you sent, what did you mean by it? Because I think or perceive it as you laughing at me. And they were like, no, 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 it's just like, it's smiley emoji. I'm smiling. I'm like, oh, okay. All the story is gone in my mind.
yeah,
And a lot of times it's important also to clarify it, but it's scary to be seen as this like dumb person
mm,
bringing up this like thing that should be common sense maybe um, or seem like you're incompetent in some ways.
yeah,
And it's something that I think I have been probably studying communication intentionally or not intentionally for a long time.
mm.
And I'm always I was an owl in your test. So that might answer a lot of things about it because I do analyze a lot of the stuff, even the way I communicate, the way I present the information,
Yeah,
because I want to do my best to make sure that the person receives it the way I want them to receive it or understand it instead of I communicate. Sometimes people would be like, why are you explaining everything around it? I'm like, I want you to understand it exactly the way I want you to understand so that we can avoid any kind of misunderstandings along the way, which even that it's part of communication back and forth anyways. But it's
yeah,
what would be good? You mentioned about the awareness of it or understanding your communication style, which is really awareness. That's where we start.
yeah.
How to become aware of that? I understand one of the ways is the test. So what the test is helping to understand, or what are the options? So I mentioned the owl as one of them. Can you walk us through?
Yeah, definitely. Let's definitely do a walkthrough. And also, I want to just weave in like the live example you've given us because I love when we've got a practical example because it means we can apply it in real life. And there's a couple of things that you've said that are so important. I think let's start with the quiz because you're so right. There's four
Yeah.
results. Let's do a little bit of a high and low so everybody's got a good understanding listening. And then let's weave in your example because it
Okay.
was so beautiful. And I was like,
And feel free to ask any more examples. I probably have plenty of them.
I honestly love this 'cause I'm like, yeah, we can get into it. Okay, so as you said, there's 4 possible animals or 4 results that you may come out as. Remember as well when you take the quiz, yes, you are probably a blend. Some people will purely be one. And so there's no right and wrong. Other thing I want to say on it as well, 'cause sometimes people will take it and feel that it's like a very work focused one. Try and look at yourself as a whole entire human. Are your behaviors probably going to be different to work versus like your personal life? Yeah, I'd expect them to adjust and shift. So just exactly as you said, you're going to get those questions where you can be like, oh, I could answer this, I could answer that. Think about what you do the majority of the time. Okay. And remember as well, this does not need to be your exact science, but it does need to start to, as you say, give you the awareness and give you a little bit of insight for you to start reflecting and say, oh, do I do this? Do I not? So, 4 results. Let's go through eagle. So, the 4 animals, I think that's helpful: eagle, owl, peacock, and a dove. So
I
that we
like how your husband in the episode guessed penguin.
he completely derailed the episode. I was like, we've done this before. No, you haven't heard this enough already. Um, and it's also quite interesting as well because my husband and I have different communication styles. So I love to use us as an example of where we adapt as well and where we have to be mindful of our blind spots because I think it's good. People appreciate it in real time. So if you come out as an ego as your dominant communication style, the way you like to communicate is very much focusing on results, solution, get straight to the point, and you're going to be direct in the way that you message things. Now, I do want to just insert a bit of a caveat here. Direct communication, guys, is not bad, okay? So stop assuming direct means aggressive. It doesn't. It means succinct, concise, and to the point. And whilst we are all striving for that, eagles, and this is where we'll talk about pros and cons of each one. Sometimes the downsides of an eagle, as being somebody that's quite to the point, direct, succinct, and solutions focused, means to some of the other styles can come across as too fast, as abrupt, as a little bit too confident. So, with every style, remember there are strengths and there are areas where we're going to get caught up. And that is very much an ego. The other thing I wanted to say on it as well is try not to attribute personality traits to them because somebody said as well, so Amira, a dove means you're going to be more empathetic. I was like, no, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Okay. So just think about how do you want to give information? How do you like to receive it? That's the
Also,
key.
it's just the way you communicate. It's not necessarily who you are or the way you are. Okay.
Exactly. Spot on, spot on. And it will link to something else that we're not going to talk about because I'll open up a whole entire kettle of fish, but like your motivational value system and what drives you. But this is very much how you receive information, how you like to receive it. So that is your eagle in the bag. Now your owl. So I come out as a dominant eagle. I am quite blended, but I mean, you'd expect me to be given the job that I do. But historically, if I did it when I was like in my most neutral space, I would have been an eagle hands down. So my husband's an owl. So in terms of, and this is also your style. So in terms of how you like to communicate, exactly as you said, you're going to do it from quite a thought provoking perspective. A lot of logic will go into it, reflection time. You are going to drill down into the detail. So, the things as an example that I value about my husband and the way he communicates is I know he's going to give me a well thought through answer. And sometimes when I'm being too fast and too quick, he's going to pick up on things that I didn't pick up on. And I need that. I need somebody to catch that for me. So I love it. And so if I'm going to go to any of my owl communicators, that's what I want. Okay. However, exactly as you said in your example, downside, sometimes guys, you give a bit too much information and we don't
Yeah.
all need that same level of information. Okay. Another thing as well
Just
that
get to the point.
I'm like, oh, guys, speed it up a little bit because I'm getting frustrated now. And for my husband, as an example, where I've had to really adapt is I know that time is quite important. So time to reflect, and again, it doesn't mean any other style doesn't need time to reflect, but ours tend to need it more. And it's because you'll want to weigh things up before you come to an answer, before you express yourselves. And so what I've had to do is know when he needs that time and be respectful of that time. Sometimes owls, as much as information, like too much information, you may come across as a little bit slow. So what is reflection time for you guys? For some of us on the receiving end, will be like, you're just
Yeah.
slowing down the process. Let's go. So that's an owl in a nutshell. Resonate?
Yeah, but it's interesting when you were talking about the eagle, and that is like one of the things that I wanted to touch on, which we can discuss after we walk through them. Even like with the eagle, I think I have adapted a lot of straightforwardness. A lot of times people describe me as there was one person that I connected with. He said that I have this mix between care and tough love, or kind of being straightforward but also caring, and in the way I would like communicate or come across. And I know that a lot of it is coming from me experiencing that from some of the people in my life. and
Yeah.
seeing how powerful that has been on me, because a lot of times people wouldn't tell me what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe they were afraid, maybe they didn't see it, maybe they weren't in a place where they were ready to, or they would have some fears around it.
Mm,
And through that, I have adapted a lot of different, even like as I was going through questions about different styles, I was like, hey, I think I even have like that one, which I will, there'll be some more that I will resonate down the line. But it's really interesting that with Owl, I think I do like to think things through, but
mm,
also I have become much more attuned with my intuition. I also have become more direct in some ways. So
mhm.
it's really interesting. As I was going through questions, I was like, there's such a mix that I'm seeing. And I could also see how I was before.
Yeah.
And in some of the questions, I was like, a few years ago, this would be my answer. Now
Mm,
it's not anymore.
yeah. So I think this is really important as people take the quiz to hear your experience of it. And it's funny because I was thinking about your style when we first met, and I can actually see for sure in that conversation, definitely owl come through. I can also see eagle come through, and I can see dove come through, which we'll get onto in a second. What's interesting, and I think this is really important as well, is you have adapted. And that's 100% what I want you to do. Otherwise, we're not going to get through life. We're not going to be better communicators. And so just bear in mind when you take the quiz, and especially as well, I do this with a lot of teams, a lot of companies, and we talk around collaboration and how can we work better and actually understand each other a little bit better. And I remember one person saying this was a few years ago, and he said, I would have been, like, originally an eagle. He said, "But now I've just adapted so much that I come out as a blend." And I was like, "Yeah, like, that's essentially the space you wanna get to. You wanna be able to adapt, but notice as well, like, when your frustrations creep in." And this will be a separate combo because it will lead to,
Yeah.
like, conflict or stressful conversations. And so you wanna always be mindful of, like, your dominant style, and what you've done
Uh,
beautifully is adapt, right? And so what will be interesting, you don't have to answer it now, but it's for you to kind of reflect on knowing that you probably are a blend of maybe all 4, but if not at least 3, because I can definitely hear and see them. Um, what was kind of like the innate one in you? Because I definitely say I'm such a blend, and most people don't guess that I'm an eagle, and it comes out more when I'm under pressure, which is slightly different. But in my world, if I could, I would only communicate as an eagle because I would get stuff done. But I know how unhelpful that is for my team. I definitely don't do it with my clients. So knowing like what is innate in me in my core, that's there. But I'm so far away from it now. So I think you just really demonstrated in real time actually go through the results, but then reflect exactly like you did and notice where you've evolved, notice where you've been mindful. Because I think that's a beautiful starting point.
all right, going to the next one.
Okay, so my peacocks, expressive communicators, big vision, ideas. You love to take people along the journey with you. You're going to get people excited. Okay, so like you will feel your peacocks in the room. They're usually my few and far between, like in every room that I'm in, especially in a training environment. Downsides, yes, they get excited. They love a big vision, but sometimes attention to detail, they're going to get bored. They're going to switch off. They're going to get irritated. So if you're in a meeting at work and you can feel your peacock switching off, it's probably because they came with the vision. They don't want to know how. They just want to get the vision
Yeah, they're the ones that deliver the vision.
yeah, exactly. And then if we then think about our doves are our very people focused communicators. So they are going to be concerned with relationships, people, how they feel. And so listen to how people talk, listen to the information they give you. When they're mindful about how people feel, the impact on them, they're usually going to be coming from that dove space. Now, a few downsides, and without labeling, because this is really important, doves, because they're so focused on people, a couple of things, they can either sometimes forget the task in hand or lose a little bit of focus. So, a bit of direction for a dove can be helpful. Sometimes they will just get wrapped up in that people element. The other side as well is they can put other people's needs ahead of their own, which will be to their detriment. And I know people do love to say doves can be people pleasers. They can also not be people pleasers. Like, you can be a people pleaser as an eagle, but it's just as a dove, be mindful of where you over compensate and overthink about other people's needs and perhaps could dial up your boundaries a little bit more.
With It's really interesting that I think we that assumption that I think it's like that in almost any area where it's which one am I? And then you allow that to one is you get more clarity, but also you can get so stuck into that, oh, I am too direct, I am this, and it's that, to what you said, that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And what would you say to somebody who, let's say they identify the style that they might see that that's who I am, but it might not be serving me in whether it's personal relationship or professional relationship? What would be the first steps for them to take, or how to start to approach it, even to get out of that mindset of this is just the way I am?
Yes. So it comes back to your example when you were talking earlier, and I thought you explained it so incredibly well in terms of what we go through just to try and communicate a message in a way that we want it to. We're going to open a whole kettle of fish, so I'll just park it for now when we talk about emojis, because modes of communication, whether it's a voice note, emojis, whether it's face to face, has a huge impact on the way we communicate as well. And I feel like in today's world, when so many of us work online in different cultures, different spaces, there's different nuance, we definitely have to kind of like bring that in. So your modes of communication is important as well. But the piece that you said was actually how much you go through between your thought, how you communicate, how the other person hears it, and then actually their understanding of it. And this is where communication styles come into play. I know we've done this whole entire piece around what's your communication style so you understand yourselves better. I'm now going to say ditch it, because the way you communicate, if you don't want to be misunderstood, is never about you. And unless you learn how to master that, you are not going to have healthy relationships, full stop, with yourself or with the people around you. And given as humans, every single one of us needs to feel connected, seen, heard. And our relationships are probably one of the most important things as human beings. So you can say, it's just who I am, but I'm going to almost bet you that there will be one relationship or one area of your life that feels really difficult because that's how you operate in. So as soon as you start to bring the awareness to like, how do you like to receive information? I had to get really aware that sometimes it's really frustrating for my team when I'm two to the line because I've just focused on the end goal. I work so fast and it can put them under pressure and it's not fun to be around. So, actually, how do we then adapt? So, this is where, and yes, I will quote something I heard on a podcast recently, actually, which I feel is very relevant. And some people listening might be thinking as I'm talking through this, but what does your other person need? What is important to them? And how might they want to receive this information? Because it's actually going to reduce your miscommunication. So, is it, for example, somebody needs time to process? Is it that they need more information? I always say when I'm training my engineers or my scientists in the room, I have to really dig deep on the detail. And I don't always do it because I work from such an intuitive space. But I know if I didn't back up my frameworks, my theory, my data, my research, they're going to challenge me. And even when I do have it, they still challenge me. But that's because their brain wants to understand. Now, old version of me could pick that up and say, why are they challenging it? Why don't they believe what I'm saying? But actually, that's not what my brain does. My brain's like, oh, they want to understand. And unless I can convince them, I'm not going to get them on board. So my key kind of second step as you build your awareness is adapt. Stop making it about you and start thinking about the other person and how they want to receive information.
Yeah, it's actually so important to read people that you talk to. Some people might be more sensitive, so maybe being really straightforward might not be the best approach
Yes.
unless you want them to shut down and
Yes.
and, and struggle
Yeah.
or not to even have any healthy communication with them. With some people, actually being straightforward really, really works on them.
Yeah.
And it's actually with this, I had the interesting conversation with one lady that I connected some time ago. We had literally just one conversation, 30-minute call. And at some point she was like, do you have any advice with like communication? I'm like, huh, where is this question coming from? We know each other only like 20, 30 minutes. How did you even like think of that? She's like,
Mm.
I just can see that you're like good at communicating. I'm like, for me, it was like, oh, interesting, interesting
Nice.
feedback.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it and I was like, it's actually about listening. It's
Mm.
about listening skills, not necessarily the way you communicate, which also delivery super important. But I think a lot of times we kind of dismiss listening
Yeah.
because it seems like communication involves just talking, just the way you communicate, but it's also before you can communicate effectively, you have to receive so that you can be sure that you communicate the right thing for the right person. And for that, you need to listen. You need to pay attention to details. Do you have any advice when it comes to the listening or listening skills?
Oh, yes. I love this. I don't talk about this enough because I think people switch off when I talk about it. But this is when people say to me, what is the one fundamental thing that makes you a better communicator? It's how well you listen. 100%. And you can talk all the talk, you can adapt your communication style. If you cannot listen, you cannot adapt and receive information. The unfortunate fact is most of us are very, very bad listeners and we actually don't know how to listen. So I want to go through actually a couple of tools that I think really help you in terms of different types of listening in different conversations, but also ask yourself, what type of listener are you? So
Mm,
are you the person that loves to interrupt somebody's sentence and then you share your own example? Now that can come from such a beautiful place because you want to connect with them. But what you do in that moment is you made it about you. So are you that listener who loves to um actually make it about yourself? Are you the listener that actually, and this is probably a bit more of a work situation, but are you the listener that just is looking for information because you're trying to get one up on somebody else? So you're not,
or look for solutions.
yes, yeah, my fixer's in the room. We love the fixer. We're not listening to just hold space. We're listening because we've got to fix it. But that's on you. That's not what the other person needs. And a really common one, probably the most common, are we listening to respond? So, okay,
Yep.
yeah, give me the break in the sentence. I need to say something. I need to show that I'm
Yeah, I
clever.
already have the list of what I want to say. Just like, just give me the space to jump in.
Yeah. Ask yourself first of all, what type of listener are you? And I used to be the person that would interrupt, and it's not a good look, right? And it came from a space more than anything, is I was really enthusiastic and I wanted to like show the other person I'm here, I'm present. But it did the exact opposite. So really, really tap into where are you really not listening and how does that lack of listening show up? And then my next kind of thing is one, golden rule, know when to be quiet. Like, please know when silence is actually golden. And there's lots of different ways that you can show that you're listening. So I love verbal nods. I think they're so powerful. And again, it will depend if you're face to face, depend if you're on a call, depend on if you're on a video call. But your verbal nods are either like literally, anyone that's like not watching, nodding your head. Sometimes
Yeah.
it'll be the yeah. Okay. Now again, we want everything in moderation because do it too much, it's gonna come across as yeah, it's like that nodding dog syndrome. It's gonna come
It's
across as sarcasm.
or it feels like too animated or not as authentic or real.
Yeah, it's
It's
so
like, "Okay, okay, stop talking, let let me"
you
like impatient nodding.
You honestly described that so beautifully. That was like a great visual there because, yeah, if you nod too much, it's gonna come across as like, "Just hurry up and stop talking." So, everything in moderation, you have to be able to read a room, and one of my clients literally said in my session last week, they said, "I'm just not good at reading cues." And I was like, "Okay, well, then we're gonna have to work on it." And they were like, "I just need someone to tell me directly." And so, if you're in that environment where somebody can, great, and you can say, "Hey, just tell me XYZ," great, but you're not always gonna have that luxury. Um, so knowing when to be silent is really important. And then other ways to show that you're listening. And then my couple of other tools that I think are so incredibly important are summarize back what you heard, because this is a great way to clarify your understanding. So actually recap. How do you summarize? What did you hear? And it gives the other person the opportunity to actually clarify and say, "Yeah, that's exactly how I felt," or "Actually, no, that's not what I meant," or "This is what I've said, but this is what I meant." And I used to have that problem massively. I would say something, but it would never quite be, and it would never quite represent what I actually meant. And it's because I'd always dilute my message. So that was a really hard lesson for me to learn how to say what I really meant. And then my last piece around listening and how we get better at it. And you actually said this earlier. And I was like, "Oh, you're on the money." Ask questions. Like, ask questions. So whether it's recap questions, whether it's clarifying questions, whether it's open questions, and it feeds into what you said already as well. So many of us want to fix. So many of us want to listen and find somebody a solution. And it came up actually in a session I was doing with a team last week. And we were actually talking about in a work environment, but they were talking about in their relationship. And they said, "Yeah, actually, like my partner was going through something painful." And I straight away jumped to the solution and how to fix it. And that wasn't what they needed. And I think if we remember most of the time as humans, we want to feel heard. And so in that moment, actually what you need to do is either be quiet, think about how to play it back to them and check that you've heard correctly, how they want that message to land, or ask them questions to find out more information depending on the context. And remember that most of the time, they don't want a solution from you.
Or you can literally check in if they want to hear potential solutions. And if they say no, don't give
Mm.
solutions.
Well, they what?
I think big part of it actually is, and I have experienced this with some communications, and actually was big frustration for me for years, especially with me knowing that I am good at communicating and explaining stuff. I have since I was a kid, even in school. I would explain stuff to my classmates, then to in uni to my course mates, and I've been like studying and working on communication, things like that. And a lot of times when I would explain people the way I think or the way I approach things, because a lot of people call me crazy and and the whole thing, and they're like, "Why are you the way you are?" or things like that. I would
Mm,
explain to them, and they still wouldn't get it, and it would be so frustrating because I would feel not understood, not seen, not heard. But it was more so because they couldn't understand it from the perspective that, or like perception that they have. And I remember there was this one moment where I was like, I literally remember the moment I had that thought. I was like, you know what? Instead of focusing on being understood, I will focus on understanding them instead. And
mm,
it was such a relief because then there was no expectation to be understood. Because once the right people come in my life that do understand me, that is huge gift, but I don't expect it.
mm.
And even through that, it's something about, and I think curiosity in general is such a big thing when it comes to communication. Because years ago, I said like I was like a coach since I was a young person. Not that I'm old now, but um, and I remember I would think, why do people trust me? Because some people would literally within the first conversation they open up to me. They share sometimes their childhood traumas or really personal stuff that they have been keeping to themselves for years. As I got more curious, I started to think about it, and I would ask them. I would be like, I appreciate you sharing this. What made you to share that with me? And
Yeah.
there's few things that I have understood. One, which is crucial, is they don't feel judged. They didn't feel like I judged. They actually feel like I was in a place where I was caring, but also I was curious, and I have been thinking about this for years, and I had really interesting conversation with one of my guests a few years ago where we talked about. In that conversation, I got to the understanding that people gonna shut down or not share or not feel safe the moment they feel judged. But then
Mm,
I was thinking, what's the opposite of being judged or judgment? It's curiosity.
mm.
And then I understood when I'm actually communicating to somebody or they share something with me, when I'm in the curiosity space, the way I describe curiosity versus judgment is when I'm curious, I have this blank page. It has nothing about my beliefs and the way I look at the world on it. It's somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm just like putting together information that they share with me. And then when it comes to like judgment, that's where we think good or bad,
Mm,
right or wrong. But then by the time I have gone through curiosity and I get to the judgment, I have the full context of the situation where I'm like, oh, I understand why you think this way or where you're coming from, instead of I disagree. This is not right
mm.
based on my perception, because I think that's where a lot of times we go straight to judgment instead of taking it through curiosity, and then we go to the judgment. But by the time we have gone through curiosity, there's no place for judgment because you understand where they come from.
I It's such an important point. And also our brains will lean on judgment because it allows us to like label or box somebody in.
Yeah,
And so it's our brain's way of saying, I can process this information, I compartmentalize somebody, I can put them in that box. And so it's, as you said, understanding why your brain does that and then saying, okay, well, how can I start from an intention or a space of curiosity? And you're so right. And I think as well, it's about honoring that we're all different. And I always say with communication, it's very rare I'm going to say, don't do this or don't do that or you shouldn't. I mean, as a coach, I don't need to think
yeah,
vocab, right? But generally speaking, there are principles around the way that I coach how to make us better communicators. And actually, is understanding how do you take that principle and embody it in a way that feels really good for you. So, when you said as well, starting from that space of curiosity, it's so incredibly important. and it opens up a dialogue, and it takes you away from that judgment space. And it's so interesting because as I was running this race on Sunday, I had like the most perfect example of how not to do this. And I was on the race line and I had a pacer in front of me. It wasn't actually that many people competing. And he had it was a 5K race. So he was like around the 25-minute mark. So if you wanted to run it in around that time, you're going to stay around him. Big sign, neon shirt. Anyway, he starts talking to me and my friend as we're on the start line. And he said, oh, guys, like, have you run this race before? And I was like, no, first time. And he said, okay, so, what you're aiming to run it in? And I was like, like anything under 23 minutes. And he was like, oh, 25? I said, no, 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 anything under 23. And we were like going into this race with a really specific time. And then what is interesting is what he said next. And he said, well, you've not run this before. And he said, I don't know if you know, but it's a very hilly course. And I just looked at him and he was super tall. So I've just like looked up at him. And bear in mind, it's about like a minute before the gun's going to go off and we're all going to start this race. And he said, yeah, when you get to 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, it's just uphill from there. And you've never done this before, but it's very traily. He said, oh, see what you can do. I'm not sure you're going to get the time you want. And what's interesting is exactly what you said around we all have our belief system, and a lot of the time without meaning any harm, we're projecting our own belief system or our limitations. And one of my favorite phrases to say to like my community is don't ever let anybody limit you, because even if they're not doing it from a malicious space, you're doing it from your space of your belief system of what's possible. And I am an overly positive mindset type of person, and I will always look at what you can do, and maybe I'll fall short of it, but I would much rather come from that space, because in today's world with all the tech we have, of the most amount of information we've ever consumed, you can't tell me what's not possible. So I think when you really highlight that point of curiosity is he didn't ask me questions. He didn't get to know what my training plan was. He didn't know why this was an important race to me. He just, without meaning to, came from the space of judgment of what wasn't possible. And for me, it was a beautiful moment in real time where I had to put into practice what I preach. And I had to say, am I going to let him get in my head? Am I going to allow him to project those beliefs onto me and tell me what I can't do? No, I'm not. And did I get the time I went in for? Yes, I did. So it was a really good real time. But I think that illustrates what you said around how we get out of judgment and understanding most of us do it without trying to be
Yeah,
nasty.
no bad intentions. It's something that I find really fascinating. You're gonna learn a lot about what people believe by the way they communicate about
Yeah.
their belief in you. And I
Mhm.
experienced it last year when I was doing the half Ironman. I gave myself 90 days to do it. Usually it's 6 to 8 months of prep. Um, I barely finished half marathon in like 3 hours, which is pretty much like the cutoff point. I'm super slow runner. And when people say, oh, don't say that, you're not slow. I'm like, I'm slow. I know that. I own it. And and when I signed up for it, I knew I'm not in a place where I can actually finish it. So I actually didn't know if I can get it done in 90 days. Plus, I have no background in triathlon. I have never done triathlon before.
Mm.
Um, I was on a road bike for the first time. I haven't done open water swimming, stuff like that. I have no background in the
Such a
sport.
challenge.
Yeah. And it was so interesting. Like I could see how there's like one person in specific who communicated in a way that I could see that they don't believe I can get it done.
Mm,
And but I was in the place where I was aware enough where I was like, "Oh, he thinks he can't get it done in this time frame or he couldn't get it done." It
mm,
has nothing to do with me or my ability, but based on his background, his experience, or maybe some assumptions or some thoughts he might have about me. That's the conclusion that he's getting to. But it has nothing to do with my actual ability or capability. It's just that perceived assumption about, oh, based on what I know about me, about the world, about my interactions with you, that's what I think is the reality. And it was again not intentional, nothing like that. But it was so interesting to go through that because whenever I take on those like big challenges or big comfortable pursuits, it's really interesting to see people's reactions because then now I'm at the place where I'm like, oh, okay, this is what they believe. It's
mm.
not about me. It's just that okay, for me that's an info or like it's like a information data or yeah, information about, oh, that's where their belief is at right now. And also I had a post that I posted about, or like clip where I talked about how sometimes for people it takes time to actually adjust. Like my
Mhm.
parents at the beginning with my half marathon, they were like, "Don't do this. This is not healthy. It's not good for your knees," and the whole thing. Plus, I was chubby on top of it as well. So it's actually all of it reasonable concerns,
Yeah,
all on point.
yeah,
I still did it, but what happened was that, and also half marathons, marathons, not a healthy sport. If you want to be healthy, do something else. That's like a side note there. But the interesting piece was that after my fourth half marathon, when I posted in the group chat about it, my mom was like, "Congratulations, well done. What's next?"
love that.
Perception completely changed. And it's sometimes it's not about people supporting or not supporting. It's like for them in their mind, it might take time to adjust their perception and be like, "Oh, this is what you do now." Or also another thing I noticed when it comes to communication, it is really important the way you perceive the person. And if you meet somebody not often, and if
Mm,
you're somebody who's growth oriented, by the time you meet them again, you have outgrown their image that they have of you in their mind. And now they talk to you or perceive you as that person that you were then. But now you're a different person.
yeah.
And it's important to, if they are closed minded or they're not open to adjusting their perspectives or perceptions of you, it can be really hard to sustain that relationship because you just keep outgrowing the image and they're talking to 7-year-old version of you. And you can see that in the way that they communicate.
Yeah, I honestly think that's so important as well, especially as well for family, like for your family relationships as well. And sometimes the hardest thing can be communicating with people that are holding you to an old version of you. And I talk about that so much with my clients. And actually, where do you find the acceptance in it? Because
Yeah.
you have to let them do it. And it's hard and it's not an easy journey. But the more you can accept and lean into it, the less you fight against it and the less resistance there is.
What has helped with that in your experience? I have a thought on what has helped me, but like what have you found that helps with that acceptance?
I think a huge piece, especially from like on a personal level, and I'll also talk about from a client level, but from a personal level, coming from a space where I always wanted to feel misunderstood. And one of my conflict triggers that will shift me communicating in a space of like healthiness to like under a space of stress is unfairness. So if I was being held in a regard that I didn't think was fair, that's where I knew that I'd like be in my trigger space. And that's when my communication would shift and feel really different. And I had to make peace. And this was a journey. This wasn't like an overnight thing, but I had to be okay with being misunderstood. And so I went through years of fighting against it. I went through years of um, being labeled or being held in a regard that I didn't think was fair. And I think I've come to a space, and this is not an age thing, because I think lots of people attribute it to an age thing. And I was like, my youngest client's 21, my oldest is 65. So I work with a real spectrum of ages and diverse people. And I always think it's about your mindset and when you want to change and shift and do something. So for me, it was making peace with who am I? Who's my authentic self? How am I living according to my values? Am I doing anybody harm as well? What am I striving for? My huge goal is, especially from a work perspective, is to add value to one person every day. And as long as I'm doing that, then for me, like that's my mission. And yes, we want that to grow, but that's like the baseline. And so I had to get comfortable when people would make comments that I didn't feel were okay. And I think this is the fine line as well, because I am very much around address the conversation and have it and don't feel bad about calling somebody out, because there's a fine line between that. But also know that not every single conversation warrants your response. And I think understanding that is really important. So is the whole world going to understand you in the way that you want to be viewed? They're not. And so understand who are the people that do matter to you and when is it worth challenging it and having that conversation in a healthy, constructive way. And when do you need to make peace with the fact that everybody isn't going to see you in the way that you see yourself?
Yeah, like one thing I can add to that from my experience is that a lot of it is about their intention. Even if they put some negativity or maybe they might be skeptical or not be super enthusiastic, what's the intent behind it? Because a lot of times they might just want to protect you, they want to avoid you being hurt by potential failure, which again, it says a lot about their perception. But I think that the key is to distinguish, do they have good intentions? Even if that message that they communicate might not resonate with you, but are the intentions the right intentions there? And I think that has helped me to, because I have a lot of people with all my races and everything worried about me, um, or my health and my, even with, like, I started amateur league basketball last year and I have been getting probably more injuries than I have had in years with that. And and there's like a lot of concerns on like the closest people, things like that. And I know that a lot of it all is like good intentions, and that's why I don't take things personally, because I just focus on, is the intention good,
Mm,
and is there a way to avoid any. I think the big thing for me was with the parents, because I have been, even like with going to study sports psychology. I was studying in Latvia. I had really good, I was in a budget place. I was
mm,
studying what I wanted, which is psychology, but I
yeah.
was bored there. I knew most of the stuff. And then I learned about sports psychology, which you can't
Mm,
study in Latvia.
mm,
So I just found schools in UK, applied to them, and I remember my parents were like, they didn't say what is wrong with you, but they're like, "Why? Like, you're doing what you want." And I was also tutoring kids at the same time, and I was doing my exercises, everything. And they're like, "You're doing everything you said that you wanted. Like, why do you have to go there?" And I was like, "I don't know. I still don't understand how they allowed me to do that."
yeah.
Um, but I think along the throughout the years, they just have learned that that's just the way I am, and there's level of acceptance that they have come to when it comes to the way I am, or because I have had, which is even when it comes to communication, I think it's such an important thing to touch on about communicating with your parents and your grandparents and
Mm,
your family, and actually get to know them. Like my family members, I think the more I have worked on myself,
go on.
the more I have seen that, one, we have much more open communication, or we have much more below the surface conversations that I would have thought we would never have, and actually get to know them so well that I'm like, wow, they actually are pretty cool people. I like to spend time with them.
Yes. You've touched on probably like 3 principles I wanna put out because I think this
Okay.
is helpful. We most definitely could have done a whole episode on communicating with family, but also as well because that brings up the most nuance, and I always say that's probably where I sit the most in that space for my one-to-one clients, and it's the thing that we don't talk about. We don't talk about that enough. Communicating is hard enough at work and in our romantic relationships, and then we don't think about our friendships, and we don't think about our family and our parents or our caregivers, so there's so many beautiful things you said, and I think if you look back at my facial expressions, you can just see my excitement as I'm listening to you. Like, "Oh, yes, yes, yes." So a few concepts here. One, assumed positive intention. And I say this as well, whether it's actually with your family or also as well when you're going into like a difficult conversation, or when you're on the receiving end of one. And actually, can we start? And I will give you the exception to this, but can we start from the space of an assumed positive intention? Because most of us, unless you're going to sit in the unhealthy category of like toxic behavior or narcissistic scale, then most of us are trying to have better connections, but we'll fumble our way through it because, as you said, we all have to communicate. This is literally my mantra, okay? We all have to communicate. Nobody teaches us how to do it well. And my life goal is to like take this back into schools so that we can just learn this, even if we learn it from a teenage year. We don't have to learn it from the get go. But I think so many of us will be served so much better in our adult life. So the first thing is, can we assume positive intention? Because most of the time, people are doing things from a space of love or care or want us to get better. Unless you absolutely can't stand the person, then okay, it's an exception. The other thing he talks about is adjustment period. And I always talk about this specifically with boundaries, but as you evolve and as you talked about, and this will lead to the third point, but give people the opportunity to adjust to you. And you've been working on yourself and you've been thinking about how you want to adapt or change or evolve or do things differently. But that person on the receiving end is usually hearing it for the first time. So know that most things take more than one conversation and allow for that adjustment phase. So it comes back to my point around being okay with like being misunderstood or them not agreeing with your decision or not being able to see it through your eye and your lens and your filter. And then my third point on it is something I love to talk about with my clients is the ripple effect. And you
Mm.
describe this in real time. So I always talk about it from the spaces naturally, the more work that you do on yourself or the more you pour into yourself, at some point most of the time, and I see this literally play out with my clients, most of the time there's a ripple effect. And so the people closest to you or around you will start to shift and evolve. Now, our goal is never to do that because you don't have control over whether somebody else changes, how they react, how they respond to you. However, keep pouring into you. I will almost, let's say 9 times out of 10, because nothing's guaranteed. 9 times out of 10, you'll start to notice the ripple effect where people will start to interact with you differently. They'll start to pick up on your cues and your behaviors. They'll start to respond in a healthier way, even if they don't know they're doing it. It'll be such an unconscious thing. And and I've seen it with I see it with my clients literally again and again and again and again. And it's one of my most beautiful things to watch because when we get to the point where I'm like, we're in the sweet spot. So just to kind of close that off when you said as well, when it comes to communicating with your parents or your caregivers or your grandparents, one, I talk a lot about generational trauma. And so depending on who's listening and depending what generation you are, I very much believe as millennials, it's a generation here to break generational trauma. So if we think about the generation above, I really truly believe they were here in for most people, not everybody, okay? So just take it with a pinch of salt if it doesn't apply with you. But really here in their survival mode. And so I feel like millennials have come through to really break that generational trauma. And it can be frustrating and it can bring up such deep emotions. And then when you go to communicate with your caregivers or your parents or your grandparents from that generation, you feel like we can't even make sense. But it
Yep.
goes back to your point around the curiosity and that acceptance piece as well. And I always say, whenever we unpack, because your communication blueprint also has to unpack your caregivers and who have you grown up around and how did they deal with conflict and what did you witness and how did you register and process that information? We do it from a space of love and empathy and not from a space of blame. And understanding that they did the best with the tools that they had at the time. But now we know better. I like to think that, okay? We're a little bit more aware or we have more resources and more access. So when it then comes to communicating with them, go through those 3 steps and about the positive intention and the adjustment phase and the ripple effect and do it from that space, as you said, of curiosity and also empathy. And there will be that adjustment phase where I will almost guarantee there will be friction and tense conversations, and
Yep.
you're going to have to get through that. So, again, it's a separate episode where we talk about difficult conversations, but I think just to hit it in a nutshell, as you said, because you're so right, but it isn't going to go from A to Z beautifully. You're going to hit those bumps in the road. You're going to have friction. You're not going to see eye to eye. And maybe relationships will even be strained for a little while. And I will say most of the time, keep doing the work and it will come full circle. And the beautiful thing I feel to close off this part when you said this is you now have conversations with your parents and your grandparents and you're like, oh my gosh, what? One, I want to hang out with you. Two, I didn't know this about you. But I think it's important to understand that piece doesn't come overnight. So if you can be willing to
Yeah.
sit in the discomfort, it will come. But that discomfort stage isn't usually quick or fast.
It's not. It's in my case, it's been years,
Yeah.
literally years,
Yeah.
many years. But it's the result or the connection that you build, it's so beautiful and it's really, really powerful. I feel like we could talk forever. Um, but the last question I have for you, which also is another question I ask everybody, is what's the
Yeah.
impossible you're chasing now?
Ask me one more time. I need to let that sink in.
What's
What's
the impossible you're chasing now?
my impossible that I'm chasing right now is to leave a legacy that really changes the way we operate as humans and the way we view and think about ourselves. So we really truly can have better relationships because I believe life is short and we all deserve to have it. We just don't always have the skills in our toolbox to know how.
Yeah, or support if you
Mm,
need.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amir, for coming on. Great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And all the information about you, anybody who wants to connect with you, reach out to you, will be in the show notes. Yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.